All right, welcome everyone who is watching. My name is Elijah Yassi, and I will be doing a defense of the Immaculate Conception today. Um, but it won't just be about the Immaculate Conception, because in my opinion, in order to talk about the Immaculate Conception, you first have to talk about original sin. They go hand in hand, because obviously, if it's not for original sin, we wouldn't have the Immaculate Conception. It wouldn't be a dogma. It wouldn't make sense. It wouldn't be anything. So, the um, teachings of the Catholic Church, as far as what we teach on original sin, will be discussed today pretty heavily. And because I do think that when East and West, Eastern Orthodox, and even Oriental Orthodox and Catholicism, when they're dialoguing on this topic, a lot of times they're talking past each other because each has a emphasis on what original sin is, not necessarily denying what the other party is saying, but their emphasis is so strong as if they don't want to um maybe during the discussions of the Immaculate Conception, they don't want to admit what the West is saying is actually legitimate in the early church as far as original sin. And I'll be going into the early church today in great depth, as far as what the early church taught about original sin, and we will see that original sin is not just about death, right? A lot of times Eastern Orthodox are so to put it it's not a nice word to say, but obsessed about original sin being so tied to death and vice versa. I think and that's the emphasis, and that's okay because obviously that's scriptural and that's truth, that's a fact. Original sin brought on death, but when we look at the fathers, we'll see that it's not just physical death, it's the spiritual death, and that's what the Catholic Church emphasizes, and that's why the dogma of the Immaculate Conception is necessary. Now, I want to start off by first quoting Father John Meyendorff, and he was an Eastern Orthodox priest and theologian. And I'm sure whoever has looked into this topic has probably heard this quote, but for anyone who's new to this topic, it is very important that we start off with this quote. Before I say it, now let me just say that this will also be a defense of the Immaculate Conception to the Protestants as well. Probably more so to the Eastern Orthodox and to Oriental Orthodox, but to the Protestant as well, because we will go into the scriptures a little bit. And then also, I believe that dialogue and understanding what the other party is actually saying is the greatest step to unity, right? The biggest obstacle to unity is assuming what the other one is saying based on what you know, based on what your tradition is. So, if your tradition teaches some things about original sin, you can't assume that that's what the other party teaches. But now the other party can say, okay, I disagree with you, but they have to show from the early church that that their beliefs are founded or grounded somewhere. It can't just be like, hey, I disagree with you, and then that's it. But we have to show, and that's what we're going to do today based on original sin and Immaculate Conception. So, John Meyendorff, he says, quotations can easily be multiplied, and they give clear indications that the Mariological piety of the Byzantines would probably have led them to accept the definition of the dogma of the Immaculate Conception of Mary as it was defined in 1854 by Pope Pius IX, if only they had shared the Western doctrine of original sin. So, in other words, the Byzantine saints, or not just the saints, but the Byzantine tradition, would have probably accepted the Immaculate Conception dogma as it was defined by the Pope in 1854, if only they had shared the Western doctrine of original sin. Well, that's why I want to start off with talking about original sin, because this is where we have to first establish what it is and ask it: does it exist in the early church, or did the Catholic Church make it up, as a lot of Eastern Orthodox would assume? Now, the Protestants would probably agree with the Catholic Church on original sin for the most part. It depending on the Protestant, but for the most part, they would agree with us on that. But it's still, something that's important to discuss. So, we want to start off first by actually defining what the Immaculate Conception is before we go into talking about what original sin is, right? Because this is our thesis, what we're defending. We're defending the Immaculate Conception. So, this is straight from Ineffabilis Deus, Pius IX. This is when it was promulgated as a dogma in 1854. And he says this is the part where it's formally defined, and dogmatically defined. And he says, to the honor of the holy and undivided Trinity, to the glory and adornment of the Virgin Mother of God, to the exaltation of the Catholic faith and the increase of the Catholic religion, we, by the authority of Jesus Christ our Lord, of the blessed apostles Peter and Paul, and by our own declare, pronounce, and define that the doctrine which holds that the Blessed Virgin Mary was the first instant of her conception, by a singular privilege and grace of the omnipotent God, in consideration of the merits of Jesus Christ, the Savior of mankind, was preserved free from all stain of original sin, has been revealed by God, and therefore is to be firmly and constantly believed by all the faithful. So that's what we're defending today, right? But in order to defend that, we first have to talk about what it means for us to say that she was preserved from all stain of original sin. That's the key. What does the stain of original sin mean? What is original sin? And from the Catholic Encyclopedia, I want to first start off by saying that there is a distinction in the Catholic Church and in the early church, as far as what original sin is in its effects to the human race, to the person, right? So it has a twofold effect. So from Catholic Encyclopedia, on the article on Immaculate Conception, it says, the formal active essence of original sin was not removed from her soul as it is removed from others by baptism. It was excluded. It never was in her soul, simultaneously with the exclusion of sin. The state of original sanctity, innocence, and justice, as opposed to original sin, was conferred upon her, by which gift every stain and fault, all depraved emotions, passions, and debilities, essentially pertaining to original sin, were excluded. But she was not made exempt from the temporal penalties of Adam, from sorrow, bodily infirmities, and death. So, in other words, to put it, to summarize what this is saying is, when we talk about original sin and the Immaculate Conception, we're saying that she was exempt from the spiritual defects of original sin, not the temporal defects, not the temporal penalties of Adam. A lot of times the East will say, well, how could she be immaculately conceived with no original sin if she died? Well, she died. Okay, this is what this is saying. It's saying she's not exempt from death. She's not exempt from sorrow. She's not exempt from bodily infirmities. That's okay. That has nothing to do with the original sin. So just right there, I've just clarified. I've just thrown out the door about 80% of the objections against the Catholic Church's teaching on the Immaculate Conception when it comes to Eastern Orthodox. They'll say she cannot be free from original sin from the moment of her conception because she died. We would agree that she died, right? So I just want to throw that out there first to start off with, because this is going to be the reoccurring theme to our thesis, this twofold teaching of original sin: spiritual defects and temporal penalties, temporal defects. um, of Adam, right? So we're not defending that she was free from the temporal ones. We're only saying that she was free from the spiritual ones. So and when it says the state of original sanctity, innocence, and justice, um, we will go into that, and what that means, um, as we go through this presentation. So as you know, like I mentioned before, we're going to talk about original sin. We're going to dive into original sin. It's going to require a lot of patience, because I do go into it pretty in depth. The effects of the fall. The effects of the fall are as such, as far as what the Catholic Church teaches: the death of the soul, and we're going to talk about what that means, and the death of the body. Those are two different things. They're not the same things. They have their same source, the fall of Adam, but they're not the same things. Three is concupiscence, this inclination to sin. Whereas we're pulled one way towards sin in our lives. It's concupiscence that comes from Adam and Eve, because Adam shifted his will from God in the garden, and he shifted it towards sin in the tree. So therefore, his punishment, um, the consequences of that, the fact that he shifted his eyes from God towards the tree, and saw that it was good to eat, and his wife did the same thing. She gave him the fruit, blah blah blah. We know the story. Um, that has a tremendous effect on humanity, because he did that. Now we have taken on the old Adam. Okay. Um, Number four is original holiness and justice is lost. Remember what we read from the Catholic Encyclopedia. We lost original holiness and justice. So Adam and Eve were created with original holiness and justice, meaning that they were friends with God. They were sons and daughters of God from the moment they were created. And then they lost that. And when you lose that, you go from being friends with God, to being sons and daughters of God, to being under the dominion of the devil, as St. Augustine would put it. And we'll talk about that as well. Original grace was lost, and we became corruptible. As the fathers teach, everything is corruptible. Everything is corruptible. Even the heavens are corruptible, as St. John Damascene teaches. Um, uh, the only thing that makes it incorruptible is grace, right? So grace is what makes things incorruptible. Intellect and will was weakened. So um, basically we our willpower is weak, and also our intellect is weaker. I mean, it's funny when people say, evolution shows that humans have gotten smarter and smarter. The smartest human being ever lived, besides Christ, who's fully God, fully man, and besides the Virgin Mary, Adam was Adam and Eve were the smartest humans ever created. Way smarter than St. Thomas Aquinas, way smarter than St. Augustine, and all the fathers probably combined, because they were just created with such purity. Their intellect was, their IQ was out of this world. And then we lost that when he fell. He lost that, and then here we are. That's why we're so stupid today. Um, Passibility, the effects of the fall. Passibility meaning that we now suffer. And as we talked about just a little bit ago, we're now under the dominion of the devil, and we were kicked out of paradise. So these are the effects of the fall. Pretty big deal, right? Pretty big deal. So if you look at the first one, the death of the soul. The death of the soul, as Saint Simeon of the New Theologian in the 10th century, even Gregory Palamas, Eastern Orthodox saint, and an Eastern Orthodox saint, and an Eastern Catholic saint as well. He taught that the death of the soul. They both taught that the death of the soul is the separation of God from the soul. That's what death of the soul is. We lost God. Like God was living in us. So when we are baptized, we regain back what we lost. And so the Holy Trinity, makes his abode in us when we're baptized, right? Um, we become we become sons of God. We become friends with God when we're baptized. So it undoes what the death of the soul did when Adam fell. The fact that we were separated from God. And that's very important. Keep that in mind because that is the essence. That is the key of the Immaculate Conception, right? Is we're saying um, basically what we're saying in the Immaculate Conception is that um, Mary, Mother Mary, was never separated from God from the moment of her conception all the way to her death. Never once was she ever separated from God, right? Whereas we are conceived separated from God and we need to be baptized to come back with God, to be friends with God, to be sons and daughters of God, right? So nothing to do with death of the body, she did. We also believe that the concupiscence is in the category of I mean, it's something that it can be either the category of the body or the category of the spiritual realm, depending on how you look at it. But in this context, we would say that that's a spiritual defect, right? Because it's not death, it's not sickness, it's not um, inf- you know infirmities and sorrows, and it's not under that category. It's under the category of sin and holiness. So it's a spiritual category. So we would say that she was exempt from it, from concupiscence. Um, Original holiness and justice. She had that original holiness and justice, right, when she was conceived. Okay, that's very important to realize and to understand because um, uh, basically what that means, original holiness and justice, is again it's connected to the fact that she was friends with God. She was in union with God from the beginning of her existence all the way to her death. She was never under the dominion of the devil. So the Catholic Church teaches that if you have original sin, you're under the dominion of the devil. So the question of the Catholic Church to the Eastern Orthodox is, well, and again, this is this is not something that we made up. In the 15th century, that under the dominion of the devil, this goes back to what Saint Augustine. It goes back to the early Church Fathers, not just him. And we'll look at these passages from the fathers later on, and we'll see that we're not just making this up. Um, if you're saying that Holy Mary, the Mother of God, had um, or was under the dominion of the devil, if you're saying that she had original sin, then you're saying that she was under the dominion of the devil. So, are you saying that she was under this dominion? Because that is a pretty serious accusation to make against the Mother of God. Um, she suffered, so she's exempt from passibility. She's not exempt from passibility. Um, Her intellect and will, this will depend on how you look at it. I mean, grace gave her the strength to have a strong will, um, and I don't know what the church teaches as far as what her intellect was, but I do know that the church teaches that the holier you are, the smarter you are. The bigger sinner you are, the dumber you are. So it would follow that she was probably an intellectual person, but a very simple and humble person. Original grace was lost, and we became corruptible. So Adam and Eve, um, if you can picture Adam and Eve being created as corruptible, but just picture this like grace protecting them from this corruptibility and making them incorruptible, right? That grace is not something that we receive when we're conceived. That's lost, but she received that original grace. And what's his name? Saint Jacob of Sarug. Um, he talks about Mother Mary receiving that original grace, and that original holiness, and that justice, in his homilies on the Annunciation. And he says that she received it the same way that Eve had it, same way that Adam and Eve had it. So, um, and he's talking about it in the event of the Annunciation, where we're talking about it in the event of her conception. And we'll talk about that more as we get into the fathers a little bit later on. Council of Trent on original sin. Council of Trent says this: if anyone does not confess that the first man, Adam, when he transgressed the commandment of God in paradise, immediately lost the holiness and justice in which he had been constituted, and through the offense of that prevarication incurred the wrath and indignation of God, and thus death, and that the word God should be capitalized, my apologies, and thus death with which God had previously threatened him, and together with death, captivity under his power, who thenceforth had the empire of death, that is to say, the devil, and that the entire Adam, through that offense of prevarication, was changed in body and soul for the worst. Let him be anathema. So basically, Adam's fall affected both body and soul. If you don't believe that, let him be anathema. And I should say the letter G from God should be capitalized, not the whole word. And Council of Trent, as most of you know, is a council of the Catholic Church put together in the 16th century against the Protestant Reformation. So they're addressing directly what the Protestants were teaching on salvation, amongst other things. So Council of Trent on original sin continues: if anyone asserts that the transgression of Adam injured him alone and not his posterity, and that the holiness and justice which he received from God, which he lost for himself alone and not for us also, or that he, being defiled by the sin of disobedience, has transfused only death and the pains of the body into the whole human race, but not sin also, which is the death of the soul, let him be anathema, since he contradicts the apostle who says, by one man sin entered into the world, and by sin death, and so death passed upon all men, in whom all have sinned. Basically, what this is saying is you can't say Adam's sin only affected him. It affected the human race. So next slide here, Council of Trent on original sin. Continuing on, it says, if anyone asserts that this sin of Adam, which in its origin is one, and by propagation, not by imitation, transfused into all, which is in each one as something that is his own, is taken away either by the forces of human nature or by a remedy other than the merit of the one mediator, our Lord Jesus Christ, who has reconciled us to God in his own blood, made unto us justice, sanctification, and redemption. Or if he denies that the merit of Jesus Christ is applied both to adults and to infants by the sacrament of baptism rightly administered in the form of the church, let him be anathema, for there is no other name under heaven given to men whereby we must be saved. And you'll see the importance of these Council of Trent decrees that I'm bringing up here, as we get into the church fathers, and showing that this is what they're teaching as well. Number 4, if anyone denies that the infants newly born from their mother's womb are to be baptized, even though they be born of baptized parents, or says that they are indeed baptized for the remission of sins, but that they derive nothing of original sin from Adam, which must be expiated by the laver of regeneration for the attainment of eternal life, whence it follows that in them the form of baptism for the remission of sins is to be understood not as true, but as false. Let him be anathema. And he gets into the apostle. He says, by one man to the world, by sin, death, and so by death passed upon all men, in whom all have sinned, is not to be understood otherwise in the Catholic Church as everyone always understood it. So this is actually almost plagiarized by the council. What's it called? I should say the Synod of Jerusalem, 1672, which is an Eastern Orthodox synod, and they quote they quote the same verse here as the Council of Trent is quoting from St. Paul in the Romans. Um, and they say the same thing, basically, that infants need baptism because they are born and essentially they're conceived with original sin. And that original sin, if you die with that original sin, um, you don't make it to heaven, right? So that is important to note, because again, when we talk about the Immaculate Conception, the question the Catholic Church can ask the Eastern Orthodox, or even some Protestants who have some piety towards the Mother Mary, and they see her as extremely holy and respect her. The question is, are you saying that she was born with original sin? She needed to be baptized and needed to be saved because she was born with that stain? Is that what you're saying? And if so, and if you're saying that she was in need of baptism, when was her baptism? When do you believe her baptism was? Some people say the Annunciation. So you're saying that the holiest creature ever created, above all angels, above all humans, combined, by all the saints, all the doctors in the church, you combine them all, and she's holier than all combined. Are you telling me that she was not made, she was not washed from original sin until she was like a teenager? um that doesn't seem like it would follow. But that's not an argument that I can make to prove the Immaculate Conception. It's just something that doesn't seem right. And that's important because as Christians, we do have what is called the sense of the faithful, and something seems off about a teaching. There's a reason why it seems off, right? It's not just something that we're being scrupulous about. To say that Mother Mary was conceived and born and lived a life all the way to her teenage life, um, being separated from God because she was not baptized until her baptism, which a lot of people believe the Annunciation was her baptism in a sense. Um, to say that she was under the dominion of the devil. And you can say, hey, hold on one second. That's just the Catholic teaching that we don't believe in that. Well, your fathers did, and we'll see it. And we'll see the early church fathers who taught these things that I'm saying. So, you can take it with them. For in virtue of this rule of faith handed down from the apostles, even infants who could not as yet commit any sin of themselves, as for this reason, are truly baptized for the remission of sins, in order that in them what they contracted by generation may be washed away by regeneration. For unless a man be born again of water and the Holy Ghost, he cannot enter the kingdom of heaven. So basically what we're saying here is um, infants need to be baptized in order um, to make it to heaven, right? So, and I think this will be the last on the Council of Trent. That says, if anyone denies that by the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, which is conferred in baptism, the guilt of original sin is remitted, or says that the whole of that which belonged to the essence of sin is not taken away, but is only canceled or not imputed, let him be anathema. And I'm seeing my connection here is saying it's fairly good, so hopefully I'm still good. Um, anyway, I'll continue and hope for the best, because I obviously no one's watching to let me know. Um, for in those who are born again, God hates nothing, because there is no condemnation to those who are truly buried together with Christ by baptism unto death, who walk not according, but putting off the old man and putting on the new one, who was created according to God, are made innocent, immaculate, pure, guiltless, and beloved of God, heirs indeed of God, joint heirs with Christ, so that there is nothing whatever to hinder their entrance into heaven. So there's that theme, the being made beloved of God, friends of God, heirs of God, joint heirs with Christ, united with God, united with Christ, made innocent, immaculate, pure. These are the things that we are saying apply to Mother Mary from the beginning of her existence all the way to her death. Catechism of the Catholic Church, the 404, it says, how did the sin of Adam become the sin of all his descendants? The whole human race is in Adam as one body of one man. By this unity of the human race, all men are implicated in Adam's sin, as all are implicated in Christ's justice. Still, the transmission of original sin is a mystery that we cannot fully understand. But we do know by revelation that Adam had received original holiness and justice, not for himself alone, but for all human nature. So, in other words, he was supposed to pass on that original holiness and justice to all of us, right? Had he passed the test. By yielding to the tempter, Adam and Eve committed a personal sin. So that's their own sin. It's not something that is our fault, right? It's not our guilt, it's their guilt. But this sin affected the human nature that they would then transmit in a fallen state. This is very important, and I'll discuss this in a little bit. It is a sin which will be transmitted by propagation to all mankind, that is, by the transmission of human nature deprived of original holiness and justice. That is why original sin is called sin only in an analogical sense. It is a sin contracted and not committed, a state and not an act. Let me unpack this because this is extremely important, and there's a lot of times where the Catholic Church is accused of believing that we're guilty of Adam's sin. That's not what we believe. We don't believe we're guilty of Adam's sin. And I know there's, if you go into the Latin, there's a word for guilt when someone's directly guilty of something, and the word for guilt when someone is kind of like indirectly guilty of something, but it wasn't something they committed. I don't want to get into all this. Let's keep it simple, right? Let's keep it simple. Basically, what we're saying is Adam, when he was created holy. He had the original holiness, original justice. He had all those things that we talked about earlier. And then he was supposed to pass that on to the human race, right? But when he fell, he had lost all those things. Now, all those the effects of the fall that we listed earlier applied to him. So now his children and us, humanity after him, are going to what is the word? Are going to we're going to receive that human nature that he is passing on to us, right? So there's the state, that should say the state. Or receiving the state of the fallen Adam. That's just the way it has to happen because he's fallen and he's going to pass on what he is to the one that he is passing it on to, which is his children, blah, blah, blah. And here we are. So it's either he's going to pass on the original holiness state if he passed on the test, or he's going to pass on the and I'm making hand gestures here as if you can see me, and I forgot that I took myself out. Either he's going to pass on the state of holiness or the state of sinfulness, depending on how he did with the test of the tree, right? Whatever you want to call it, the temptation. We know he failed, and so since he failed, he passes on the state of sin to us and the rest of humanity. And this is not something we made up. This is a patristic teaching. It continues on and it says, although it is proper to each individual, original sin does not have the character of a personal fault in any of Adam's descendants. It is a deprivation of original sin and justice. But human nature has not been totally corrupted. It is wounded in the natural powers proper to it, subject to ignorance, suffering, and the dominion of death, and inclined to sin, an inclination to evil that is called concupiscence. Baptism, by imparting the life of Christ's grace, erases original sin, and turns a man back towards God. But the consequences for nature, weakened and inclined to evil, persist in man and summon him to spiritual battle. Okay. A very important distinction to make is that when we're baptized and original sin is wiped away from us, that spiritual effect of the fall, concupiscence, the weakness of intellect and will, that still is applied to us, right? And we have to spend our whole life trying to chisel away from that, and becoming more and more like the the second Adam, Christ, right? The way the first Adam was, but even more holy. Um, that's what we're supposed to be doing in our spiritual life. Very different from the Mother of God. The Mother of God, um, she did not have original sin, and then it was wiped from her, right? She just never touched her. So concupiscence never touched her as well, right? So it's different for us. Even though original sin has been washed away from us when we're baptized, concupiscence is still there. Concupiscence is not there for her because sin never contracted her. She never contracted it, I should say. Okay, that's a very important distinction. Now we get to the early church. Council of Carthage, 419, Canon 110. Likewise, it seemed good that whosoever denies that infants newly from their mother's womb should be baptized, or says that baptism is for remission of sins, but that they derive from Adam no original sin, which needs to be removed by the laver of regeneration, from whence the conclusion follows that in them the form of baptism for the remission of sins is to be understood as false and not true, let him be anathema. For no otherwise can be understood what the apostle says, by one man sin has come into the world, and death through sin, and so death passed upon all men, and all that have sinned, and that all have sinned. Then the Catholic Church everywhere diffused his has always understood it. For on account of this rule of faith, even infants who could have committed as yet no sin themselves, therefore are truly baptized for the remission of sins, in order that what in them is a result of generation may be cleansed by regeneration. So basically, in other words, just to sum it all up, it's saying you can't just say you can't say that we don't have original sin. You can't say that infants, just because they're innocent and blah blah blah, they have no committed sin, that they don't have any original sin. They have to be baptized when they're infants, because they have original sin. You can't say they're innocent without any sin in them. They do have sin in them. That sin comes from Adam and it's passed on. It's almost, well, I should say that the Council of Trent seems like they almost plagiarized this, right? And then, well, it's not plagiarized because it's the same church that taught that, so it's and then the um, Synod of Jerusalem 1672 also seems like they're saying the same thing word for word. So this is not something that's controversial. We all agree that infants should be baptized because they have original sin. That original sin comes from Adam. Then we look at Council of Carthage. I'm sorry, Council of Orange, Second Council of Orange, 529 AD. It says, Canon 1, if anyone denies that it is the whole man, that is both body and soul, that was changed for the worse through the offense of Adam's sin, but believe that the freedom of the soul remains unimpaired, and that only the body is subject to corruption, he is deceived by the error of Pelagius, and contradicts the scriptures, which says, the soul that sins shall die. And do you not know that if you yield yourselves to anyone as obedient slaves, you are the slaves of the one whom you obey? And for whatever overcomes a man, to that he is enslaved. Canon 2, if anyone asserts that Adam's sin affected him alone and not his descendants also, or at least if he declares that it is only the death of the body which is a punishment for sin, and not also that sin, which is the death of the soul, passed through one man to the whole human race, he does injustice to God and contradicts the apostle who says, therefore, as sin came into the world through one man, and death through sin, and so death spread to all men because all men sin. Basically, this is saying that original sin is twofold. It's not just the effects of the body. It's not just death. It's not death, 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 all death, death, death. Original sin is just death, death, death. No, it's a spiritual defect as well. It's a spiritual death, death of the soul. It's death of the soul being sin, and death of the soul being the from separation from between God and the human soul, right? And this is something that I'm not making up. You can read Polemos, and if you have time later, I don't want to go too long. We're already at 40 minutes. We haven't even talked about the defense of the Immaculate Conception. And as I said, we're going to go really in depth into original sin because we have to lay the ground of what we're defending before we defend it. You can read Polemos. You can read Saint Timothy the theologian, the 10th century. They will talk about this death of the soul versus death of the body, and they say the death of the soul is the separation from God, the humans and God being separated. Now we get into the church fathers, and this is a pretty long quote, but it is very important. And let me see if it's just one slide. So um, Saint Gregory of Nyssa. He's going to talk about the twofold of the original sin: death of the body and death of the soul. He says, now it was not the body merely, but the whole man, compacted of soul and body, that was lost. Indeed, if we are to speak more exactly, the soul was lost sooner than the body. For disobedience is a sin, not of the body, but of the will. And the will properly belongs to the soul, from which the whole disaster of our nature had its beginning, as the thread of God that admits of no falsehood, testifies in the declaration that if the day that they should eat of the forbidden fruit, death without respite would attach to the act, right? Eat this and you will die. That's what that's what God says. Now, since the condemnation of man was twofold, death correspondingly affects in each part of our nature the deprivation of the twofold life that operates in him who is thus mortally stricken. The condemnation of man was twofold, and so therefore there's two consequences. There's two effects: the soul and the body. Continuing on, he says, for the death of the body consists in the extinction of the means of sensible perception and in the dissolution of the body into its kindred elements. But the soul that sins, he says, it shall die. Ezekiel 18:20. Now sin is nothing else than alienation from God. There it is. There it is. This is what I'm defending here. The death of the soul that we say is sin. That's the alienation from God, the separation from God, right? Who is the true and only life? Now, sin is nothing else than alienation from God, who is the true and only life. Accordingly, the first man lived many hundred years after his disobedience, and yet God lied not when he said, in the day that you eat thereof, you shall surely die. For by the fact of his alienation from the true life, the sentence of death was ratified against him that self same day, and after this, at a much later time, there followed also the bodily death of Adam. So what he's saying is, when God says, if you eat of this fruit, you shall die, and then Adam ate this fruit, but he did not physically die. He kept on living for hundreds and hundreds of years. And he's saying that God did not lie when he said you shall die, because when he said you shall die if you eat this fruit is a spiritual death. It's alienation from God. And God is a true life. And since God is a true life, it is actually a true death that Adam died when he ate the fruit. And so now the question that we have to ask is, when Mother Mary was she conceived in alienation from God? That's the question that we're answering when we answer the Immaculate Conception. That's when we answer the dogma of the Immaculate Conception. When we say what we believe, what we're saying is, no, she was never alienated from God. That's all essentially what it boils down to, right? There are some other things that we teach on the Immaculate Conception that are not necessarily dogma. The dogma is the fact that was she separated from God or not? Did she have original holiness or not? That's the dogma. Everything else is is secondary or follows because of the dogma. It follows. It follows that she didn't have concupiscence, but that's not the dogma. Did she have concupiscence or not? We believe that she didn't, but that's not the dogma. The dogma is, um, did she was she alienated from God? Was she separated from God? Now, most theologians would say, if not all theologians would say, that she did not have concupiscence, and so it is something that we teach, but it's never been formally defined. And we'll get to the fun stuff later, but I got to build this foundation here, this important foundation of body and soul, spiritual defects, temporal defects. Saint Cyril of Alexandria. What has Adam's guilt? And there's some Greek in here in case anybody here reads Greek. There you have it. What has Adam's guilt got to do with us? What has Adam's guilt got to do with us? Why are we held responsible for his sin when we were not even born when he committed it? Did not God say the parents will not die for the children, nor the children for the parents, but the soul which has sinned, it shall die? How then shall we defend this doctrine? The soul, I say, which has sinned, it shall die. We have become sinners because of Adam's disobedience in the following manner. After he fell into sin and surrendered to corruption, impure lusts, concupiscence, invaded the nature of his flesh. And at the same time, the evil law of our members was born. For our nature contracted the disease of sin. Let me read that again. Invaded the nature of his flesh, and at the same time, the evil law. We have become sinners because of Adam's disobedience, or in the following manner. After he fell into sin, surrendered to corruption, and pure lusts invaded the nature of his flesh, and at the same time, the evil law of our members was born. For our nature contracted the disease of sin. Our nature contracted the disease of sin because of the disobedience of one man, that is Adam. Now, remember what I talked about earlier. I said that we are. You have a twofold. You have a twofold Adam as far as what he can pass on. He can pass on either holiness to us or this disease, right? And the state that he passes on that we receive is the disease that he passed on to us. That's what Saint Cyril of Alexandria is teaching, exactly what the catechism that I read earlier teaches, right? There's no difference here. It's the guilt that we're talking about, that we're guilty of, in a sense, for lack of a better term. That guilt, that is what we've contracted from Adam's state that he passed on to us. It's a state. That's what it is. This is very important. And now the question is this passed on to Mother Mary? This was not because, and thus many became sinners. This was not because they sinned along with Adam. That's what we're saying too. Not because we sinned, because they did not then exist, obviously, but because they had the same nature as Adam, which fell under the law of sin. Thus, just as human nature acquired the weakness of corruption in Adam because of disobedience and evil desires invaded it, so the same nature was later set free by Christ, who was obedient to God the Father and did not commit sin. So the first Adam was disobedient to God. He passed on disobedience. The second Adam, Christ, he was obedient to God. He passed on obedience to us. Whoever is born under Christ, how are you born under Christ? You're baptized, and then you become under the dominion of God rather than the dominion of the devil. So when you're baptized, that's when we get rid of original sin. That's when we can live forever, and death cannot touch us, even though we die physically. But the more important spiritual death, we don't live a life in alienation from God for the rest of eternity. Okay, very important. These are two saints. Now, keep in mind, the first saint was a Greek saint. Second saint here is an Egyptian saint. So this is a very heavy saint for the Oriental Orthodox, and the last saint, Saint Gregory, very heavy saint for the Eastern Orthodox. So this is not something that I'm not even quoting any Western fathers right now, right? This is just Eastern fathers that I'm quoting. That's proving what my thesis is. Well, not my thesis, but what my thesis is about. And then continuing on, he says, "Thus has the guilt of the disobedience that is by Adam been remitted. Thus has the power of the curse ceased, and the dominion of death been brought to decay. And this too, Paul teaches, saying, For as by disobedience of one man," how many times are we going to read this? "The many became sinners. So by the obedience of the one, the many became righteous. For the whole for the whole nature of man, for the whole nature of man became guilty in the person of him who was first formed." I'm sorry, I'm not reading St. Augustine. I'm not reading the Catechism. I'm not reading St. Thomas Aquinas. I'm reading St. Cyril of Alexandria, who says that the whole nature of man became guilty. Not because we committed the sin ourselves, not that kind of guilt. We became guilty is because we received from Adam the state of sin. And so automatically, when you receive the state of sin, that sin makes you guilty. Not for committing the sin, but that's just the way the story goes. That's just the way it happens. It's reality. If you are receiving a bad human nature, a defective one, you need something that washes that away and gives you back what you lost, or what was originally lost. Not what you lost, but what was lost. And that's what the Syriac saints talk about when they talk about the robe of glory that we put on when we're baptized. When Adam committed sin, um, he had this robe of glory, and then he lost it, right? And then he's naked, and then he had to, put on the the fig tree leaves, right, to cover himself. He was ashamed. He was ashamed. Um, so the Syriac fathers say when Christ was baptized, when he went in the water, and then he came out of the water. When he went in the water, he took back that robe of glory that Adam lost, and he put it on. He put on the robe of glory. So now, if you are baptized under Christ, you receive that robe of glory again. It's beautiful. It's very beautiful teaching. St. Ambrose of Milan, I apologize, this is a Western saint, in whom, that is, in Adam, all have sinned, and he said, in whom, using the masculine form, when he was speaking of a woman, because the reference was not to a specific individual, but, and I'm sorry about the spelling error, but to the race. It is clear, therefore, that all have sinned in Adam, in mass, as it were, for when he himself um, was corrupted by sin, all whom he begot were born under sin. Same thing. He's saying the same thing St. Cyril of Alexandria is saying, St. Cyril of Alexandria. On his account, then all are sinners, because we were all from him. He lost God's favor when he strayed. Okay? St. John Chrysostom, we go back to the Greek fathers. You see how many are the benefits of baptism, and some think its heavenly grace consists only in the remission of sins, but we have enumerated 10 honors. For this reason, we baptize even infants, though they are not defiled by sin, so that there may be given to them holiness, righteousness, adoption, inheritance, brotherhood with Christ, and that they may be his members. Let me get out of this here so you see the reference. And I think this one, if you want to see the reference, because I was covering it, it's right there for St. Ambrose, and going back to St. John Chrysostom, or Chrysostom, as some say it. So he's saying even though the infants don't have any like personal sin. The benefits of baptism is holiness, righteousness, adoption, inheritance, brotherhood of Christ. So basically, he believes that an infant is alienated from God, and when they're baptized, they have that brotherhood with Christ again. They have that holiness. They have that adoption, the original adoption that Adam and Eve had before they sinned. Okay. And the question here is, did Mother Mary have those things when she was conceived, or did she receive those later on? That's the question of the Immaculate Conception, right? So personally ask yourself this as a Christian. Do I believe that Mother Mary was under the dominion of the devil? Do I believe that she was alienated from God? Do I believe that she did not have holiness from the beginning of her existence? Do I believe that she did not have original justice? That she was not an adopted daughter of God? Do I believe these things? Do I believe that she had an inclination to sin? If the answer is yes to any of those things, you need to re-examine your spiritual life, because that is, um, or you should re-examine your theological um, beliefs, because that's a serious accusation that you're making against the Mother of God. St. John Chrysostom says, "Little given, much gotten. By the donation of food, the original sin is discharged. Just as Adam transmitted the sin by his wicked eating, we destroy that treacherous food when we cure the need and hunger of our brother." St. Athanasius, another Alexandrian saint, he says, "God not only made us out of nothing, but he also gave us freely, by the grace of the word, a life divinely oriented. But men rejected the things of eternity, and on the prompting of the devil, turned to the things of corruption. They became the cause of their own corruption and death. For as I said before, they were by nature corruptible, but were destined by the grace of the communion of the Word to have escaped the consequences of nature, that they remained good. Had they remained good, because of the Word and his dwelling among them, even the corruption natural to them would not have affected them." So in other words, they were made corruptible, um, but grace of the Word covered them and made them incorruptible. And as long as they, played nice, they would have continued on with that. But they did not play nice, and so they lost that. That that grace is the original holiness. It's the original justice. It's being incorruptible. Those are the things that Saint Athanasius is teaching, which goes back to the slide when we talked about the effects of the fall. And I said original grace was lost and we became corruptible. That's a patristic teaching. We're not making this up. All the things that I listed are being shown here by the fathers and by the Council of Orange and Carthage and all that fun stuff. Okay, St. John Damascene. Now it is evident that all creation is liable to most of these affections, and all from its very nature is subject to corruption. There you go again. All things then which are brought into existence are subject to corruption according to the law of their nature. And so even the heavens themselves are corruptible, but by the grace of God they are maintained and preserved. And that would include Mother Mary. She would be corruptible if it was not for grace. Fundamentals of Catholic Dogma. It's a good book. If you want to learn what the Catholic Church teaches, pick it up. Ludwig van Ott, Fundamentals of Catholic Dogma, page 202. He talks about Immaculate Conception pertains to spiritual only, not temporal. He says freedom from original sin does not necessarily involve freedom from all defects which came into the world as a punishment for sin. Mary, like Christ himself, was subject to the general human defects in so far as these involve no moral imperfection. So in other words, anything that is spiritual is what she's exempt from. Anything that is temporal, she's not exempt from. So yes, You can say that Mary died. Yes, you can say that she suffered. Yes, you can say that she got sick. Yes, all those all those defects that the Eastern Orthodox will throw at us and say, you can't say that she did not have original sin because she had those defects. Well, yeah, well, she did have those defects, but that has nothing to do with original sin. And what we're saying, it has nothing to do with Immaculate Conception at all. Nothing at all. I mean, and if they would just sit there and learn what we're actually teaching, the dialogue would move further along a lot better than it does. And you just get stuck talking about original sin. You can't even move on to Immaculate Conception, which is why I'm talking about original sin so heavily. But we're going to get to the good stuff in just a little bit. In page 208, writes, "Death, not a punishment for sin, but fitting that she dies. For Mary, death, in consequence of her freedom from original sin and from personal sin, was not a consequence or punishment of sin. However, it seems fitting that Mary's body, which was by nature mortal, should be in conformity with that of her divine Son, subject to the general law of death." So, in other words, and this is something that the Byzantine fathers teach as well in the Dormition homilies, and anybody who's seen my shows know that I'm always recommending this book. It's I'm pulling up a book that you guys can't even see. Here we go. The Dormition on the Dormition of Mary, early patristic homilies. It's by um why is the name I'm sorry, Brian Daly, Father Brian Daly. Man, I just blanked out for a little bit there. I've done a show with him and William. I think one time, maybe twice, I can't remember. But yeah, he translated the homilies for the Dormition homilies from the Greek fathers, and this is a reoccurring theme, especially from Saint John Damascene, where he says, death. I mean, he's not literally saying this, but just to sum it up, her death is not a consequence of originals of sin or of original sin. He doesn't say original sin, but it's not a consequence of sin. Obviously, he's talking about original sin. It's not a punishment to her. It is it is fitting that she dies because her son died, and the fact that she's human, it's fitting that she dies because she's human. Mary grew in grace and holiness until death. This is important because a lot of times people think that when we say the Immaculate Conception, they think that we're teaching that Mary received perfect holiness from the moment of her conception, and she did not need to grow in holiness, and she did not grow in holiness. That she was perfectly perfect, 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 perfect. Mary grew in grace and holiness until death. It says, while Christ's fullness of grace was perfect from the beginning, the Mother of God increased in grace and holiness up to her death. She became holier and holier and holier. So, when there are passages in the Fathers in the Annunciation where they talk about her becoming more holy at the Annunciation, that does not contradict the Immaculate Conception. A lot of times I've seen Eastern Orthodox apologists say, since the Fathers taught that Mary grew in holiness throughout her life, especially at the Annunciation, therefore that disproves the Immaculate Conception. No, that disproves what you think the Immaculate Conception teaches. We don't think that she was perfectly holy from the very beginning of her existence, and to the fact that where she did not need to grow in holiness, because as the East will teach, the teaching of theosis is that no one ever stops growing in holiness. No matter how holy you are, you continue growing and growing and growing and growing in holiness. And that applies to the Mother of God. So let's talk about stain. When we talked about the teaching of Pope Pius IX, Ineffabilis Deus, the promulgation of the dogma of the Immaculate Conception, he says that she was exempt from the stain of original sin. So what does a stain mean? The stain of original sin is a reference to the following: that man is born without the original holiness and grace that Adam and Eve enjoyed prior to the fall. That man is born under the dominion of the devil. That man is born with an inclination to sin. So these are the three, basically, uh, three different possibilities of what stain means, according to the theologians of the Catholic Church. Most of them would say number one and number two. Mostly number one is where um, is what Pope Pius meant when he talked about stain. There are a minority of theologians who believe it is number three, but it is a minority, that it is about concupiscence. In my opinion, it's number one, but it doesn't matter what my opinion is. This is why I'm showing you quotes throughout this whole presentation. And if you've ever watched my shows, I am very heavy on showing other theologians, quotes, fathers, bishops, popes. I don't sit here and just give you opinions from what I think is the teaching. Right? I'm not a theologian. I'm not a scholar. I'm not any of those things. Right? So I you're not going to benefit listening to my opinion. That's why I just present to you the material, and it is up to you to do what you want with it. Right? Um, it's not coming from me. It's coming from the fathers, coming from the Catholic Church, coming from fundamentals of Catholic dogma. I'm not making this up. Right? Scriptural evidence. I want to get into this a little bit. This is where the Protestants uh, would benefit from this. Hopefully, benefit from this. So Genesis 3:15 is the first quote. I didn't reference that, but it's Genesis 3:15. I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your seed and her seed. He shall bruise your head, and you shall bruise his heel. Now we're getting into the scriptural evidence of the Immaculate Conception. After an hour and 5 minutes or 6 minutes of talking about original sin. Okay, so how does this passage allude to the Immaculate Conception? Well, if we go back to what stain means, that man is born without original holiness and grace that Adam and Eve enjoyed prior to the fall, that man is born under the dominion of the devil. So, if you look at number one and number two, they go together, right? Number one and number two, they go together. They actually all go together in some ways, right? They're all connected, but in a great way, number one and number two go together. So that man is born under the dominion of the devil. That is how we are conceived. But Mother Mary is not conceived that way, as far as what we think, what we believe, what we teach, is that she was born under the friendship with God. And one passage that we allude to, that we point to, that we believe alludes to the Immaculate Conception, is Genesis 3:15, because it says, I will put enmity between you and the woman. We believe you is the serpent, the devil, and the woman is Mary. That's what we believe, right? And between your seed and her seed, he shall bruise your head and you shall bruise his heel. So that enmity is being put there, we believe, so that the devil cannot touch the future woman the way he touched this woman, Eve. Okay? So God will make sure that this does not happen again. When he recreates the world in a spiritual sense, when he recreates the world, um, that is something that God makes sure. And the fathers are very heavy on Mary being the new Eve, right? This is not something that's late. This is very early on. We're talking about Saint Irenaeus, Saint Justin Martyr. We're talking about all the pretty much all the saints after them, right? Augustine, Ambrose, Ephraim, all the saints said that Mary was the new Eve in so many words, right? And this is very important because if she's a new Eve, then she has to play the role that the old Eve couldn't do, right? The obedience versus disobedience. So the first woman, Eve, there was uh, an event of the fall where she was disobedient to God and she was obedient to the devil, and then so she fell. So the devil touched her in a spiritual sense, and it defected her. It was a defect. It impacted her. It affected her. The new Eve, Mother Mary, she was put through the same test when the angel appeared to her. This time it was a good angel, not a bad angel, and that's why she said, That's why she asked the question of, um, well, how is this gonna work? I know not man, right? How is this gonna work? Because Eve did not really um question the serpent in a prudent way, right? She just said, well, God says we will not die. Uh, God says we will die if we eat the fruit. And he says, you will surely not die. And she didn't ask him further, like, oh, okay, well, let me have some. Um, but Mother Mary inquired prudently. She made sure it was a good angel. She made sure first before she acted, because she's prudent, she's virtuous, she's humble, she's holy. Okay. Um, excuse me. So this is why we believe that this passage alludes to Mother Mary, and original in the Immaculate Conception, because I will put enmity between you and the women. Now one can say, well, okay, hold on one second. How can you say that? But what if this enmity was put later on? Like, let's say, she was born with original sin. Let's say she was conceived and born with original sin, and then she lived her life through original sin, and then one day God puts this enmity at the Annunciation. Well, I will put enmity between you and the woman. That seems to suggest that the enmity is preventing the devil from touching the woman, and the devil actually touches the woman we believe to be Eve, to be Mary, obviously Eve in a literal sense, but also Mary. I will put enmity between you and the woman. If the woman is Mary and he puts enmity, it would defeat the purpose if the woman was actually touched by the devil. Mother Mary was touched by the devil throughout 14 years of her life, or any part of her life, even a second of her life. It would defeat the purpose of what he's saying. I will put enmity between you and the woman. The whole purpose is saying, I'm not going to let this happen again. I'm going to put this separation between the devil and the woman. This enmity will not exist with this woman. It's going to be different this time, right? That's why we believe that this passage alludes to the Immaculate Conception. It doesn't prove it. It's not, direct evidence. But you can't say that the scriptures are quiet about it, because, I do think that this is a pretty fair support of the Immaculate Conception, in my opinion. Now, you can dispute that, obviously, but, that's for you to decide. And then we have Luke 128. Now, it says, as the angel came and appeared to Mother Mary, he says, "Hail, full of grace." The significance of this passage is the Greek word suggests one who has been fully graced from before the angel appeared to her. Okay, so it's almost like you're saying you have been graced in the past. But wait a minute, I thought that she became I thought that she received her original holiness and all that fun stuff and removed the original sin at the Annunciation. But she's been graced in the past prior to the Annunciation. I can't say it's from the beginning of her existence from this passage, but I can at least say that it was prior to that, right? It was prior to that. And then going back to Genesis 3:15, I also want to point out that in Revelation 12, there is that passage where it talks about that the devil tried to make war with her, but he failed. So there's another passage in the scripture in Revelation 12 where it talks about how the devil did not touch Mother Mary, which is what the Immaculate Conception is. That everyone who was born with original sin has been touched by the devil. It's a defect, because that original sin came from the serpent. That's the devil. And if you're born, you have that defect. You were touched by the devil because he um what's the word I'm looking for? Deceived Adam and Eve. And if he deceived Adam and Eve, and we received the nature, in a sense, we've been deceived as well. And but Mother Mary was not deceived. The devil cannot touch her. Here's a passage that says that I will put enmity between you and the woman. And then there's another passage in Revelation 12, which is obviously talking about the same characters of the woman, of the serpent. In fact, it says the beast from of old, right, in Revelation 12. It's saying that the serpent is what I'm talking about in Revelation 12. He could not touch her. Now you say, oh wait, hold on one second. How do we know that Revelation 12 is about Mary? Well, there were some fathers who taught that it was about Mary. There were some fathers who taught it was about the church, and there were some fathers who taught it was Israel, or Jerusalem. Why can't it be all three? In some sense, and you can't deny that in some sense it is Mother Mary, because it says that she was the mother of the Messiah. Christ had one mother. Patristic evidence. Theodotus of Ancyria, in the 5th century, he says, a virgin, innocent, spotless, free of all defect, untouched, unsullied, holy in soul and body, like a lily sprouting among thorns. Now, um, the importance of this verse, this passage, this quotation here by Theodotus, is not the fact that he's saying that she's innocent, spotless, free of all defect. All that stuff alludes to her holiness, holy in soul and body, um, untouched, unsullied. These are all, they can point to the Immaculate Conception, sure, but that's not the strong. This is not why I quote this. The reason why I quote this is the reoccurring theme from the fathers, and this is one of them, that say that Mary was a lily among thorns. Now, if you go back to Genesis, and you read, Genesis 3 during the fall, um, you know, the I think, let me go back. Let me pull it up, because I do want to, I do want to read that passage because it's very important. It says, and to Adam he said, because you have sinned, because you have listened to the voice of your wife and have eaten of the tree of which I commanded you, you shall not eat of it. Cursed is the ground because of you, in toil you shall eat of it all the days of your life. Thorns and thistles shall bring forth thorns and thistles it shall bring forth to you, and you shall eat the plants of the field in the sweat of your face, and you shall eat bread till you return to the ground. For out of it you are taken, you are dust, and to dust you shall return. This theme of thorns goes back to the fall of Adam and Eve, right? So to say that she's a lily sprouting among thorns, it seems to say that she's unique to us. She's unique. She's a lily. She's not a thorn. Thorns are what is in reference to the fallen nature, to the fallen humans. And here she is, a flower sprouting among thorns. So I think now, if you look at that verse in reference to the Genesis and what I'm saying, and then you add on top of it, you sprinkle virgin, innocent, spotless, free of all defects, untouched, unsullied, holy in soul and body. You sprinkle those things on top of that, and then you get closer and closer to the Immaculate Conception. It's not saying, oh, exactly verbatim, but that seems to be what he's talking about, right? Especially because of the word thorns here. Especially the word virgin, innocent, spotless, free of all defects. These are all going. These are themes that go back to the fall, because Adam and Eve were innocent and then they fell. They were spotless and then they were stained. They were free from all defects and then they were defected. They were untouched and then they were touched. They were holy in soul and body, and then they became unholy. Romanus of Melotist, on the birth of Mary, he says, Anna conceived the Immaculate One. Conceived the Immaculate One. I mean, that is pretty much verbatim. Not verbatim, but that is basically literally saying that she was conceived immaculately. She was not, I'm sorry, that's a different way, that's a different understanding. She was immaculately conceived. Anna conceived the Immaculate One. So the Immaculate One being Mother Mary, because Anna is her mother, Immaculate One. She conceived the Immaculate One, not gave birth to the Immaculate One. Notice it's the conception of Mary from that time. Patristic evidence for it. I have what, 5 quotes here from the fathers. There's more. I just didn't want to go into each one. I think these suffice, in my opinion, to show that this is an early church teaching. Not that every church father believed in the Immaculate Conception, or not every church father can be shown to at least believe in the logic of it. But you can't say that it's not scriptural. You can't say that there's no evidence for it in Scripture. You can't say that it's not patristic. When we say what it actually is, what is she when she was conceived immaculately, meaning that um, she was in union with God and not under the dominion of the devil. If that's all we're saying, then we show that here with the patristics. Quote number 3. Oh boy, I didn't put who it is, but it is. It's very late here, 11:08. I know William Albrecht is watching this right now, and he's shouting the name. He's shouting the name Theotechnos. Excuse me, I had to cough. Theotechnos of Livius, Byzantine father. He wrote a Dormition on the Mother of God in his book. And that comes from him. This quote comes from him. He says, she was begotten like the cherubim from pure and spotless clay. She was begotten like the cherubim from pure and spotless clay. Now, clay is in reference to her creation. And her creation from the beginning was like the cherubim, pure and spotless. Spotless, meaning that it was never had spots in it, right? It never had any effects on it. And I say this is very important because you can have someone cleansed, but I don't think you can say that that person is spotless, because they did have spots in them, but they were cleansed from those spots. But they once had spots. She was spotless, just like the word in the first one that we said, untouched. If someone was touched and then you let go of them, you can't say that they were untouched, because they were once touched. For while she was still in the loins of her father, in case you think he's not talking about her conception, he's going back to the loins of her father, Joachim. Her mother Anna received a message from a holy angel who said to her, your seed, in case you don't think we're talking about the conception of Mary here, your seed shall be spoken of throughout the whole world. She was begotten like the cherubim. This is clearly in a reference to her first moment of her existence. The next one is Saint John Damascene. Now, I think that there is a dispute these days, scholarly from scholarships that say that this may not have been written by Saint John Damascene. I don't know about all that, um, but that's something from Father Kappas, who told us that. I don't know where the scholarship is, but I did want to throw it out there because if it is a first millennium teaching, at least if it was written in the first millennium, it still has some importance, right? It says, "O most blessed loins of Joachim, from which came forth a spotless seed. O glorious womb of Anne, in which a most holy offspring grew." And then I didn't quote the whole thing, but he goes on to call her heaven, heavenly, in her seed, heavenly, right? In fact, let me see if I can. No, I'm not gonna try to find this online right now. It's gonna take me too long. I don't want to sit here, have you guys sit here and wait for me. But you can look it up. If you just Google those words that I quoted, you can find it. You can find the whole quote. But he calls her heavenly. Now, I don't know about you, but if a seed, spotless seed, from the glorious womb of Anne, in which a most holy offspring grew, holy and heavenly. I don't know about you, but if a seed is called holy, if a seed is called heavenly, what is missing from that to where we can say, "Oh no, wait, hold on, it's not holy enough to say that she did not have the original sin." If someone believed that someone had original sin from the beginning of existence, they would not call that thing holy. They would not call that thing um heavenly. It just wouldn't follow that something that has a defect, and that defect is a stain, and that stain is the alienation from God. If you're alienated from God, you're not holy, let alone heavenly. Heavenly, right? You're alienated from God, you're not heavenly. You're under the dominion of the devil. Next one, the serpent, by whose deceitful promise we were likened to brute beasts, did not enter into this paradise. And the paradise that he's talking about is Mother Mary. He calls her paradise, but that's not the quote. That's not the emphasis here. I'm not saying that because he calls her paradise, oh, that she's immaculate conceived. No, the serpent. Where's that from Genesis. Did not enter into this paradise. Why is he saying that? Because the first Eve, the serpent entered into her, and as Saint Ephraim would say, he entered from her ear, because she listened to him. That's how he entered, through her ear. And he affected her in that paradise that they were in, that they were kicked out of. These are themes from Genesis where the fall is. And he's saying that the serpent did not enter into this paradise, Mother Mary, because she was never touched by him. She was never touched, as Genesis 3:15 says, I will put enmity. And as Revelation 12 says, he tried to make war with her, but he did not succeed. I want to go back to Theotechnos, because in addition to what I read in the same homily, I do want to read something that he says that's very interesting. On page 75 of On the Dormition of Mary, on the very top, he says, while on earth she was heaven, she associated with angels and was the ambassador for the human race before the Immaculate King. And then further on, and I want to read this important passage here. He says, let no one think that the miracle worked by the all-holy body of the Mother of God was something impossible, for she had remained a virgin incorrupt, It was, after all, fitting for the spiritual ark, which contained the vessel of manna and the blooming rod of Aaron, for she blossomed and bore the fruit that can never be consumed. The former ark defeated the hostile foreigners who wanted to do it violence. How much more, then, should the spiritual ark defeat those who from the beginning have fought against God and against the beautiful name that it is invoked over us? For she is ark and vase and throne and heaven. She was judged worthy to be entrusted with ineffable mysteries. She was judged worthy to reveal things hidden and sealed in the book of Daniel, and through her, all of us with faces unveiled will gaze on the glory of the Lord. Through her, the veil of Moses' face has been lifted. Um, and so the importance here is he's basically saying that she's the Ark of the Covenant. The Ark of the Covenant, you touch that thing, the first one, you die, right? In this theme, it's almost like if the devil had touched her, ironically, he would have died. He would not have dared to even approach her. He knows the level of holiness that she is, right? He couldn't make war with her. So there was that enmity between the devil and Mother Mary. This is what we're defending, that enmity. That's what the Immaculate Conception is. Let's not complicate things. It's the enmity. Did she have unity with the devil or with God? When we're conceived, when we're born with original sin, we have unity with the devil. We need to take that out and change that to being friends with God. And then there's another passage here, and by the way, that was page 76. There was something else in here that I don't think I marked. But he talks about see, I'm doing this now. I'm trying to find something making you wait. Man. Anyway, basically, it's a passage on had so there's a teaching. Oh, I think I can find it easily. I should have done this before. Number six. So there's a teaching on the Protevangelium of James that says that Mother Mary, when she was basically like an infant, maybe like 2 years old or 3 years old, she entered into the temple, and she was fed spiritual food by the angels, right? And so, yeah, here we go. I found it. Okay, so I'm just going to read it. For if, when he saw his disciples discouraged by his passion, Jesus said to them, I go to prepare a place for you. How much more will he have prepared a place for the one who begot him? All the more so, as she had all the more right of access to him. So the immaculate body of the all holy one and her pure soul, in which God took delight, were taken up to heaven with an escort of angels. For if she had received nourishment from angels in the Lord's temple while she was still a child, talking about the Protevangelium reference, how much more should she be served by the powers on high after she had become herself the Lord's temple? So, in other words, if she was receiving spiritual nourishment at the temple when she was a child, and I think she was 2 or 3 years old, how much more would she have received more spiritual nourishment when she became the mother of God? Okay, so and I'm going to get into this a little bit. There's something that we teach in the Catholic Church that is about predestination, the predestination of the divine maternity, of her role as divine maternity. So we believe that from the beginning that Mother Mary His role was, already in God's mind, obviously. God sees all things, knows what's going to happen. He knows that there's going to be a fall. He knows that there's going to be a Mother Mary. And so from this predestination, um, she was predestined to take on this role as divine maternity. And the spiritual things that is given to her that were not given to us, or that are not given to us, that were given to her, like no original sin, no concupiscence, those are all things that were given to her in order for her to perfectly play out her role as divine maternity, mother of God. Because the first mother, Eve, failed in doing that. So Mother Mary was predestined to succeed in doing that. And so she was given these gifts to her in order to succeed in playing out the role as divine maternity. So no original sin, because Eve was touched by the serpent, so she was not. No concupiscence, because Eve was deceived by the serpent and she was not. She had original holiness. Eve lost it. And then she was united with God from the beginning of her existence. Eve lost that. And so in order to make sure she plays the role of divine maternity in a successful manner, in the prudent manner, in the virtuous manner, and in the way that it needs to be played in order for salvation to uh, to be given to us, for Christ to be raised, and he goes through his life, and then he's on the cross and he dies for us, he resurrects. Um, his mother was with him along those lines, along that road. So that's very important to understand. Now, some objections that we hear about the Immaculate Conception is, well, first we say, as some fathers would teach, that Christ took on holy flesh, holy and undefiled flesh from her, from the Mother of God. So she had to be holy in order for him to be born holy from her, right? So there's two things. Excuse me. Christ was conceived without original sin because he did not have a male seed to conceive him. It's from the power of the Holy Ghost. And so that is one reason why Christ did not have original sin. Another reason why is because she did not pass on a corrupt nature onto him, because she had a pure nature. Now, the question that follows after that is, the objection is, well, then how could she have that pure nature unless her mother has the pure nature? And her mother's mother's blah, blah, blah. See, that's another misunderstanding, because that's not how marriage works. That's not. Let me unpack this a little bit. Okay. So we believe that Christ, and I see my connection here again. I hope that is still good. It's unfortunate. I've never done this not live. Usually it's live. This is my first time doing a show that's recorded without anyone watching, so I don't really know if the internet is good or not. Okay, I think it's good now. So Christ was holy by nature. Mary was holy by grace. And that's a significant distinction to make. So when the fathers say that Christ is the only one who is perfectly sinless, his sinlessness is very different than hers, than Mother Mary's. Very different, right? It's not the same thing. It's not equal holiness. Christ was holy by nature because he did not have a father. Mother Mary was holy by grace because she did have a father and a mother to conceive her. And so, if you have a father and a mother to conceive you, according to a lot of the church fathers, you should have original sin. But in her case, she did not have original sin because grace, not nature, but grace stepped in and made sure that that enmity was there between the devil and the mother of God. Grace made she did not contract original sin. Grace. And so you don't need her mother to be holy for that. You just need grace to interrupt what would have happened. What would have happened is that she would have contracted original sin if it wasn't for grace. But because grace came, not literally came, um, but grace was given that um that she so that she did not contract original sin. So now she has a pure nature from the beginning of her existence because was not touched by the devil. So she if you're not touched by the devil, you have a pure nature. You're touched by God. You're touched by grace. Your original holiness, original grace, friendship with God, and all that stuff. And then she passes that on to Christ because he did not have a father and she had a pure nature. Um, I'm not going to remember the name, but there's a there was a letter that was written. I think it was either during the time of the Council of Chalcedon or Ephesians, which talks about um, what I'm talking about here in the sense that she had a pure nature and then she passed it on to Christ. I don't think I have any more slides left. I don't. Okay. So we can go into more objections. So another objection is some fathers would say that Mother Mary um, were um, was purified at the Annunciation, and they'll say, well, if she's purified at the Annunciation, then she's not conceived without original sin because she needed to be purified. Purification doesn't always mean that you're being purified from sin. Purification, as some Eastern Orthodox saints, in reference to Mother Mary, actually say that when the fathers say that Mary was cleansed at the Annunciation, is not from sin; it's an increase of holiness. That she became more holy, and that's what I just read here from Theotechnos. Um, how much more? How much more should she be served by the powers on high after she had become herself the Lord's temple? She became more holy. How much more? She was nourished when she was a child. She was nourished at the Annunciation. She was nourished throughout her life, not just those two events. St. Gregory the Illuminator, and this is an objection, says that, and when this word, "Hail, thou art highly favored," reached her, in the very moment of her hearing it, the Holy Spirit entered into the undefiled temple of the Virgin, and her mind and her members were sanctified together. So the objection is that he's teaching that she was cleansed. Her mind was cleansed, and her members were sanctified. Basically, concupiscence. That's what it seems like it's talking about. Or is it? Well, if you just look at a couple paragraphs prior to this quote, which is a paragraph 3 from Homily 2 on the Annunciation, and you can find this on New Advent. If you look at a couple paragraphs before, he says this about Mother Mary. He says, "For in your arms shall be carried," and she was perplexed by this word, for she was inexperienced in all the addresses of men, and welcomed quiet as the mother of prudence and purity. Yet pure and immaculate and stainless image herself, she shrank not in terror from the angelic apparition like most of the prophets, as indeed true virginity has a kind of affinity and equality with the angels. Equality with the angels. For the Holy Virgin guarded her carefully the torch of virginity and gave diligent heed that it should not be extinguished or defiled. What is he saying when he talks about her being um, her being um, cleansed, sanctified, her mind and her members? What does that mean? We have to explain that, right? We can't just quote something else that says that she was pure and immaculate and stainless, even though those help. But we have to explain what is he talking about? What is Gregory talking about? The first Eve, um, when she was tested by the devil, she was deceived and she fell. The second Eve, to make sure that she accepts the message of the angel. This is talking about the Annunciation. Hail, thou art highly favored one, or full of grace. Um, the very moment of hearing, the Holy Spirit entered into the undefiled temple of the Virgin. The Holy Spirit entered into the undefiled temple. Undefiled, not touched, not stained. Already we have this theme of her not being stained. So why does she need to be sanctified? The sanctification here is an intellect one, is an intellectual one. It's so that she's being cleansed, not from concupiscence. I don't know anyone who dares think that Mother Mary had concupiscence until the Annunciation. I don't know anybody who does in the apostolic churches. Maybe Protestants. What this is saying, and this is a reoccurring theme from the fathers, is that her members, her mind and her members were cleansed in order for her to understand the message that is about to be given to her, that she is going to become a virgin mother of God. That's what it's talking about. And if you want to go back and read the context, homily 2 on the Annunciation, paragraph 3, read the whole thing. This is not me making this up. He's not talking about concupiscence. He's not talking about concupiscence. Someone who is saying that Mother Mary has concupiscence wouldn't call her pure, immaculate, stainless, undefiled, temple of the virginity, equality with angels. It just doesn't follow logically that he would accuse her of concupiscence. Another passage from the same author, he says, For through me all the heavenly powers hail you, the Holy Virgin. Yeah, rather, he himself, who is Lord of all the heavenly powers and of all creation, has selected you as the Holy One, and the holy here being WHOLLY, fair. And through your holy, HOLY, and chaste and pure and undefiled womb, the enlightening pearl comes forth for the salvation of all the world. Since of all the race of man, sins of all the race of man, you are by birth the Holy One, and the more honorable, and the purer, and the more pious than any other. And you have a mind, remember earlier, her mind is being cleansed, supposedly of concupiscence or some dirt. But here he says, but you have a mind whiter than the snow, and a body made purer than any gold, however fine, and a womb such as the object which Ezekiel saw. So if she is being cleansed at the Annunciation from any defect, then she would not be holy by birth. She would not have a mind whiter than the snow. This is the same author. This is paragraph 1. This is paragraph 1, homily 2 on the Annunciation. Um, Another paragraph. So paragraph 2 from the same author. He says, "Clearly then did the prophet behold in type him who was born of the Holy Virgin, whom you, O Holy Virgin, would have had no strength to bear had you not beamed forth for that time with all that is glorious and virtuous. And with what words of laudation then shall we describe her dignity? With what indignations and proclamations of praise shall we celebrate her stainless figure? With what spiritual song or word shall we honor her who is most glorious among the angels? She is planted in the house of God like a fruitful olive that the Holy Spirit overshadowed, and by her means all sons and heirs of kingdom of Christ. She is the ever blooming paradise of incorruptibility, wherein is planted the tree that gives life and that furnishes of all the fruits of immortality." Notice the theme of Genesis here: paradise, tree, fruit. Um, and mind you, here it's talking about she is planted in the house of God like a fruitful olive that the Holy Spirit overshadowed. So they're saying she's planted in the house of God like a fruitful olive during the Annunciation. All these themes that are being attributed to her are at the Annunciation. Um, so it's not like she's being made a new person. She's being made more holy at the Annunciation, not removing some sort of defect from her. And then there's another objection from Eastern Orthodox that from the same author, St. Gregory. It says, Gabriel said to Mary, "No longer shall the devil be against you. For where of old that adversary inflicted the womb, there now first of all does the physician apply the salve of deliverance. Where death came forth, there has life now prepared its entrance." So the objection here is, well, you say that she's not under the dominion of the devil, but here Saint Gregory is saying that Gabriel said to Mary, "No longer shall the devil be against you." No longer, meaning that the devil was against her and now he's not. So that contradicts what I've been saying, right? How she's not under the dominion of the devil. How am I going to get out of this one? Okay. Well, first of all, is the objection suggesting that the devil was against her? Is it saying that she was under the dominion of the devil at some point of her life? Seemingly so. And if he is saying that, are you agree with him? He's not saying that. And we're going to see what he's actually saying. It's taken out of context. Let's quote the whole thing in context. It's going to be it's a few sentences, so bear with me. "Again have we the tidings of joy, again the announcements of liberty, again the restoration, again the returns, again the promise of gladness, again the release from slavery. An angel talks with the virgin in order that the serpent may no more have converse with a woman. In the 6th month, it is said that the angel Gabriel was sent from God to a virgin espoused to a man. Gabriel was sent to declare the worldwide salvation. Gabriel was sent to bear to Adam the signature of his restoration. Gabriel was sent to a virgin in order to transform the dishonor of the female sex into honor. Gabriel was sent to prepare the worthy chamber for the pure spouse. Gabriel was sent to wed the creature with the creator. Gabriel was sent to the animate palace of the king of the angels. Gabriel was sent to a virgin espoused to Joseph, but preserved for Jesus, the Son of God. The incorporeal servant was sent to the virgin undefiled. One free from sin was sent to one that admitted no corruption. Huh. So it seems to me that the fact that he says an angel talks with the virgin in order that the serpent may no more have converse with the woman, serpent, devil, woman, Eve, serpent, devil, woman, Eve. He says Gabriel was sent there to Adam the signature of his restoration. Gabriel was sent to a virgin in order to transform the dishonor of the female sex into honor. So when we go back and we read, Gabriel said to Mary, "No longer shall the devil be against you." This is not a personal against you, but you being the representative of the female sex, because it was the devil that was against Eve, who represented the mother of all creatures, the female. They all come from. The devil was against her at the Eve is a female, and Mother Mary, undoes that whole knot. Gabriel was sent to bear to Adam the signature of his restoration. Gabriel was sent to a virgin in order to transform the dishonor of the female sex into honor. That's how the devil is no longer against her, as a representative of the female sex, not personally to her. Because he says, an angel talked with the virgin in order that the serpent may no longer have have converse with the woman. So she undoes that, the devil being against the female sex. That's the context. It's not about an accusation against Mary being having the devil being against her, as if to say that the devil is attacking Mary successfully. I mean, I don't know what this objection is even trying to prove, really. It doesn't even prove what it's trying to prove. But even if it does, you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot, because this is our mother, what we're talking about. And if you are not convinced of what I'm saying, I got more for you. He says, "Hail, thou that art highly favored, the Lord is with you. No longer shall the devil be against you. For where of old that adversary inflicted the wound, there now, first of all, does the physician apply for the salve of deliverance." I'm going to quote it in context. Continuing on, this is what he says after. He says, "Where death came forth, there has life now prepared its entrance. By a woman came the flood of our ills, and by a woman also our blessings have their spring. Hail, thou that art highly favored. Be not ashamed, as if you were the cause of our condemnation, for you are made the mother of him who was at once judge and redeemer." This doesn't apply to you. You're the one who reversed this. That's basically what he's saying. "Hail, you stainless mother of the bridegroom of a world bereft. Hail, thou that hast sunk in your womb the death that came from the mother Eve. Hail, thou animate temple of God. Hail, thou equal home of heaven and earth alike. Hail, you amplest receptacle of the illimitable nature." Same author. Same author. That's the context. And if you're still not convinced, he says this: "For you have become to woman the beginning of the new creation. You have given to us boldness of access into paradise, and you have put to flight our ancient woe. For after you, the race of women shall no more be made the subject of reproach. No more do the successors of Eve fear the ancient curse." or the pangs of childbirth. For Christ, the Redeemer of our race, the Savior of all nature, the spiritual Adam who has healed the hurt of the creature of earth, comes forth from your holy womb. This is not an accusation against the Mother of God. In fact, to twist it to say that, she's as if she's under the dominion of the devil, to twist it. And then the fact that this is the opposite of what he's saying, it's mind-boggling to me. He's literally saying that this does not apply to you. You actually reverse this. And that's why the devil is no longer against you as a representative of the female sex. There's another passage from St. Ephrem that is quoted to say that, St. Ephrem is supposedly teaching that Mother Mary is being cleansed of concupiscence. St. Ephrem writes this. And this is from Nativity Hymn 28, 6 through 7. He says, Your Mary's refined conception wipes clean and dissolves the impulsive desire of your members. Holiness and purity he poured forth and filled you with holy floods. He purified you so that one would say, how good is she, that glorious woman. Since the conception is the glorious one, he stamped himself as if by signet upon your mind. So basically, it's the objection is St. Ephrem is teaching that supposedly that Mother Mary has been wiped clean of impulsive desires of her members, concupiscence, supposedly concupiscence. But let's take a look at the context. The context is this. If you read the whole thing, he says, the same melody of the animals in the precious tent in the ark were chaste. How much more would Mary, in whom dwelt Emmanuel, turn against marriage? Okay, keep that in mind. Your will increased you and sanctified you. Your Lord increased and adorns you as well. The animals of Noah were compelled by force, but you chose by your will, glories to his birth. So right from the get-go, we see that the context here is not so much concupiscence, but sex and marriage. Ordinarily, a woman needs a man in order to make a baby, and this is done through sexual relations. But with Mary, because her conception of Christ is through the Holy Ghost, she is in no need of sexual desires. Okay, now please note, sexual desire and intercourse are not sinful for St. Ephrem. He will admit as much in verse 3, as you'll see here. He says, but intercourse is not defiled, nor is marriage accursed. Chastity's wings are greater and lighter than the wings of marriage. Intercourse, while pure, is lower. Its house of refuge is modest darkness. Confidence belongs entirely to chastity, which light unfolds. Okay, so intercourse, wider, pure, is lower. Intercourse, while pure, is lower, I should say. Intercourse, while pure, is lower. So it's not a cleansing of concupiscence. The context here is that she's not getting purified of anything sinful. It is a purification from a desire to know man in order to make a baby. And that desire is not bad, according to St. Ephrem. As he says, intercourse is not defiled, nor is marriage accursed. Intercourse, while pure, is lower. And there's that famous quote from St. Ephrem where he says about Mother Mary and Christ, says, you alone and your mother are more beautiful than the others, for there is no blemish in you, nor any stain upon your mother. And he also says this about Mary. He says, Mary and Eve, two people without guilt, two simple people, were identical. Later, however, one became the cause of our death and the other the cause of our life. If you want to, I'll read one more and then I'll end it here. Um, Saint Ambrose, he says about Mother Mary, he says she was a virgin not only in body but also in mind. Because I quote this because there's an accusation here that Saint Ambrose taught that Mother Mary had concupiscence, and at the Annunciation it was cleansed. How could you have concupiscence if your mind was a virgin? She was a virgin not only in body but also in mind. So how could you have concupiscence if you're virgin in mind and body? That's from his works called Virgins, Book 2, Chapter 2, verse paragraph 7. Actually, I'll read one more because I have to read this one. Saint Ambrose. Come then and search out your sheep, not through your servants or hired men, but do it yourself. Lift me up bodily and in the flesh, which is fallen in Adam. Lift me up not from Sarah, but from Mary, a virgin not only undefiled, but a virgin whom grace had made inviolate, free of every stain of sin. Commentary on Psalm 118, St. Ambrose. I'll end it here. I think I gave enough um, patristics. There's more. You can go on my blog, Underground Catholicism, and read a. I have, I think, 3, maybe 4 articles there on the Immaculate Conception. This one that I'm like pulling these from is from it's called Sam Shamoon Show, answering more objections against the Immaculate Conception. So if you want to know more, as far as like digging up more quotes, you can go on there and you can find some more. And I keep saying that's it. But man, there's so many good ones. Um, I want to read. I don't know if I have it. Yes, I do. Last one, I promise. Nobody is blessed as you. This is Saint Sophronius, um, first millennium saint. Nobody is blessed as you. Nobody is sanctified as you. Nobody is magnified as you. Nobody's pre-purified as you. Nobody is beaming as you. Nobody is brilliant as you. The Holy Spirit comes down upon you. The stainless woman. This is a different quote from him. It is going to make you more pure. It is going to provide for you a fructiferous power. The reason why I quote this is because if she was cleansed at the Annunciation, but here he is saying nobody's pre-purified as you. And then he says in another passage, the Holy Spirit comes down upon you, the Annunciation, the stainless woman. It's going to make you more pure. Not it's going to make you pure or it's going to take away a defect from you. It's going to make you more pure. That's the Annunciation. That's what happened at the Annunciation. She became more pure. So that's it for my defense of the Immaculate Conception. I hope it was edifying. I hope you got a lot out of it. I have the quotes up here from the patristics. I got 5. These are my favorite ones. These are the ones that I really like to show. But I did give you more for my blog post. And if you want to look at the references, you can go into my blog and check it out. Once again, my name is Elijah Yassi, and it's been a pleasure doing this here. And I thank William Albrecht for inviting me to this documentary, and I am grateful for being a part of this, and honored and humbled, and hopefully it helped you guys. And yeah, God bless you guys, and have a wonderful day or night, or whatever time of the day you're watching this.